Good morning, community. Welcome to another episode of Keeping It Real with Dr. Nita. I am your host, Dr. Nita Polite Wilson, executive coach and team dynamic strategist focusing on diversity, inclusion, and belonging. I am also known as the C-suite whisperer. I help executives help to position themselves in the space of diversity, inclusion, and belonging from a personal perspective that helps them to be more effective in the workplace. And this morning, I have with me, as always, my allies in action, Ella Garcia. He's the founder and the host of LPD Cast, which is focused on professional development for first generation students. Sharday Perry, a behavioral health specialist, helping patients in crisis regain mental and emotional stability. We are missing Adrian Pastor, graphic artist and jack of all trades. We miss you, Adrian. Jazzy Newton, founder and CEO of Just Jazzy, a virtual assistant company, and Brian McKenzie, youth and community advocate dedicated to uplifting the wealth and wellness of the Black community. These folks all provide me with perspectives that I would not normally think of, and I hope they do the same for you. Welcome, crew. How are we doing today?
Hey.
Hi,
Hey.
well, thank you.
So I want to first start off by stating the obvious. Just before we went on air, we were all chopping it up a little bit about how we're really busy and we need to be able to unplug, but we're too busy to unplug. But unless we unplug, we can't keep up with our own busyness. So I want to do a one breath check in with everybody that says, this is how I'm showing up and this is what I need from the group. I will start. I am in a space that has been very busy and a little counterproductive this month, actually the last 2 days. And what I need from the group is a reminder that it's okay to be human. Who's next?
I'll go next. So I am showing up and I am here with courage, ready to try. I am struggling with the guilt of giving myself time and not feeling like I need to be doing something, need to be there helping with someone. So I could really just use some support in knowing that it's okay to say no and to sit down and do nothing.
Good for you. Doing nothing is a gift to yourself that we all need sometimes. Congratulations and welcome to the club. Who's next?
I can go. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
I think right now I'm showing up patient, but a little anxious at the same time. So I'm trying to lean more into not doing everything all at once and knowing that it's a process. One of my mentors said all of the stuff that I'm trying to do is what people who are 45 and 50 are trying to do or are doing. So just really understanding that, even though you have all these plans and all these goals, which is a good thing, the process is more important than just the destination. And I hear that all the time, and I hate it. It's cliche, but it's true. So I guess for the group, I would like for you all to just be encouraging. Like for me, just a text here, text there. Me and Eloy have been talking over the last 3 weeks or so. It's been great. I just got to slow down. I have everything I need already. And I keep trying to remember that knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. It doesn't make sense to store things and just keep collecting things unless you're using it to help yourself and others.
I love that. You said a couple things that encourage me, especially about the process, especially as one who reminds people trust the process. Personally, I have a hard time sometimes trusting the process. But then what you said reminds me of a podcast I did a couple of weeks ago with Mickey. And we talked about the fact that knowledge is power, but self-knowledge is transformative. The more we know ourselves and the more we listen to ourselves and the more often we allow ourselves that space to sit and do nothing, like Shar just said, the better off we'll be. So again, welcome to the club, Brian, the club of overachievers. Welcome. Jazzy, you were next. And then
Yeah, I can piggyback off of pretty much everything that both of you just said, because for me, it's not necessarily like work overwhelm, but like change overwhelm, because moved out of my apartment, moving into different countries where I don't speak the language, just like kind of everything's changing at once. And I think for me, it's been making me show up as like anxious and sad and scared. And there is excitement there, but it's like I'm still focused more on like working through the other emotions. And so what I would need from the group is really like reminders that like trust the process and like everything's going to be all right. And the biggest thing is reminding myself that I shouldn't do anything that I don't want to do, and like removing should from my vocabulary so that I don't have to be like, oh, I don't want to do that, but I should, or something like that. So
I love that. And if we could all get to a space where it's not about what I should do, but what resonates with who I am and my purpose, I think we'd all be much, much better off. Eloy.
Yeah, so I've been showing up lately, I think overly eager because I'm getting towards the end of my undergrad and have been speeding up a bit, but I'm not there yet. And there's been a reminder to slow down and enjoy it, right? This conversation you've had before of be present. And what I would need from the group is actually what we're all doing now is sharing our experience and reminding each other that it's okay and take time, take some time to regroup.
Thank you for that. What you just said about sharing our experience, every podcast for me is always about sharing our lived experiences. And even though I have a particular segment on the third Saturday of every month called Lived Experiences with whomever the guest is, all of these conversations are really about our lived experience. And when I think about the theme for this month, March Madness, a nod to what's going on in college basketball, the madness comes from the frenetic pace of everything, whether it's on a basketball court and you're seeing a really fast game with well-matched competitors, or whether we're talking about the things that we've just talked about this morning, showing up in a very fast-paced life and not having the opportunity to unplug and just sit and do nothing. A gentleman that I used to report to years ago, he said, are you giving yourself stare at the ceiling time, which is literally like unplug, stop, and just stare at the ceiling and what's coming to you. And we don't have time for that. And we need to make time for that if we're going to show up, be our best, be aligned with our purpose, what it is we're supposed to be doing, who we're supposed to bless, just by being in the space to be able to say, how can I support you? So with that, let's talk about our theme, March Madness. And it was a really interesting monologue for me to do. I know just enough about basketball because my husband happens to be an official. And I'm always thrilled to watch him watch a professional game and, oh, what a flop. Man, nobody touched him, right? But let's talk about that in the workspace in terms of microaggressions and the fact that because they're microaggressions and they're hard to identify and they're hard to detect, when we have the courage to bring them up, particularly in the workplace, some people might see it as a flop. Oh, this person's just trying to get some attention. They weren't really hurt. So I want to hear from you all. One microaggression that you've experienced, and when you brought it up to someone, how were you treated? Were you taken seriously? Or did someone try to get you to think or even tell you it's not that big of a deal? Who wants to start?
Okay, I'll jump in there. So I work in an environment where I had an issue in the past regarding my hair and another individual. So I had brought that up. So I kind of had that on my track record. One of my coworkers has a tendency to make comments saying I am whiter than she is, or the whitest black girl that she knows, or whitewashed, or something along those lines. And that's a statement I've heard my entire life growing up, that I didn't fit the stereotypical African-American female. And so therefore I must not be. Instead, I resonated more with the stereotypical Caucasian female. And it was something that I just grew to accept, something that I would hear and would just kind of roll off the shoulders because I honestly didn't know better. But I found in the workplace, this isn't something I want associated with my name. This isn't a compliment. And so I had a conversation with a girl, and she basically said that I was sensitive. And, she referred to the past situation with the hair. And she's like, I think you're taking the personal things too sensitive. You come into work, you put on a uniform, and that's it. And it was from having these conversations and just learning there's more strength in who I am and the power of my voice. I kind of was like, no, I put on a uniform to do my job, but my skin and who I am, I can't change that. I can't, remove that or tuck it under a jacket. So I'm not being sensitive. This is creating a hostile work environment. This is making me uncomfortable. And it's simply inaccurate. And it's rude for you to assume that because my personality, I have all these positive traits that maybe you're not used to, that they can't possibly be attached to the African American, female. So it was a productive conversation. I think we both just kind of expressed how we felt, but it was definitely one of those moments where I was like, yes, 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 like. So.
And how did she take that when you were trying to explain to her, regardless of whether or not you agree with what I'm telling you, this is how I'm feeling and this is how this is impacting me?
Unfortunately, she took it as like black girl sass, kind of like, okay, girl, like, and it was kind of like you're missing the entirety of what I'm saying. But I said my piece, and that's all I can be responsible for.
How did you recover from that black girl sass?
I felt proud of myself that I stood up for myself, and that I taught myself something in that moment. I learned, like, no, you're right. Like, this isn't something you should just let roll off your shoulder because it's easier. So I think because that was a win for me, ignorance is not always bliss. So
It's not. And how did that impact your ability to show up as the team member that you need to be? Because we've heard it said a team is only as strong as its weakest link. And if you can't show up your 100%, your weak link, not that you are weak, but that weakens your ability to show up and be 100%. How did that impact the team dynamics?
really good. I think something I've been working through in my personal journey is not feeling like I have to prove my worth or earn my value. And that kind of gave me, a little back support and coming in as this is who I am. And there's certain things about me that, I can adapt. And there's certain things about me where this is just me and you get me or you don't give any. So I'm coming in 100% stronger and more confident. So it was like a bittersweet, it's kind of sad for you to say that and think that, but it was really an eye-opening moment for me and, for her.
Congratulations. I'm happy for you that it strengthened your voice. Good for you. Who wants to share next?
Yeah, I can share. No, don't mind. Brian, I think I got you right before you were going to. So, as a bilingual person in the workforce or seeking bilingual work or compensation for bilingual work, there's this really interesting paradox that happens sometimes where we are considered intelligent enough to process all of the information twice, essentially, and share it to a greater number of customers or clients. Yet, depending on how you sound when you are sharing that information, for example, if you have an identifiable accent, our intelligence is also questioned like simultaneously. So we're considered smart enough, but also dumb enough to to speak two languages. And the way that showed up before is the once an employer found out that I was bilingual, my work was scrutinized like twice as much when it wasn't before. So there was a micromanaging element that I had to like prove my proficiency in the English language that I didn't have to do before. And I think part of that is tied to nationalism, kind of like whenever someone finds out that you have very direct roots, maybe parents somewhere else, then our character, our intelligence, different parts of our identity can be put into question. And in the workforce, in the workplace, that adds more stress to us, like you were saying. So, what ended up happening is I wasn't showing up as productive as I was before because I had to prove what I never had to before. And I thought it was really interesting because one thing that typically would make me more or better for the position actually had the counter effect and really made me feel like this place isn't a place where you can grow, because while some people would say, oh, this is good, let's continue to coach you, and being able to talk to two different communities, the opposite happened. And it was like, just don't even go there, just focus on this. So that was something that when I shared with coworkers, I did get that kind of like, well, just don't worry about it, right? Well, you're not being asked to do bilingual work, so why do you care? It's like, well, no, I'm not, but now I'm being asked to prove my proficiency. So that was didn't I wasn't there long. I was happy not to be there after, but I was able to brush it off, like Shar was saying, and feel more proud in the fact that I didn't allow myself to stay there longer, and just move on. Sometimes you just have to move on.
So I want to go back to something that you said that just really disturbed me. And I'm not sure if I let that be known visually or not, whether or not I reacted. But when you said dumb enough and smart enough, I need you to give me some more about that, because my assumption is if one speaks with an accent, it could be assumed not smart enough to master the King's English, right? But then also assume that you're smart enough to have mastery of two languages. So how can those two exist together? I need you to give me some more about that, because that doesn't make sense to me, and I like to think I'm kind of smart.
You are absolutely smart. Yeah, that's where the rub is, right? In processing when we experience these things as bilingual people. And what some people do is work really hard to get rid of an identifying accent from their culture. Essentially, it's part of who they are. And I think that's kind of sad, because we twist ourselves into into a mold that isn't necessarily for us.
So I
But
want to interrupt you real quickly, because I just want to make sure I'm clear about this. So we try and eliminate the accent that might infer to other people that we're not smart enough. Yet it's the accent that indicates we speak a different language that makes us valuable.
yes, yeah, it's that paradox of being over qualified and then considered, um, I don't want to say underqualified, but eliminated because of that reason.
Does that
And
go to some of what you said in previous discussions about the white gaze and seeing things through a white lens, and those assumptions, interpretations, and limiting beliefs that comes with that?
absolutely, because there's a lot of emphasis put on the question of which language was your first language.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for a lot of people, our role in our family has always been bilingual or more than that. So when someone asks me, what language was your first language? And I'm getting the question from someone who isn't POC, who isn't bilingual, I know the answer they want to hear is English, because that's going to satisfy whatever doubts or worries they have about my intelligence and my potential for performance. So it's absolutely tied to what I've mentioned before about the white gaze. How
Mm-hmm.
do I appease the white gaze so that I get the blessing and the acceptance, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's what it feels like. It feels like, okay, well, now you're welcome into this group where if you give the wrong answer, and let's just say I wanted to say Spanish, then it's like, oh, well, it was nice to talk to you today, but we're going to seek someone who gave us the right answer. When in that question, I don't think there's a wrong answer, because we're speaking one language, the
Mm-hmm.
English language. So
Mm-hmm.
whether or not Spanish was my first, what does that have to do with the conversation we're having right now about
Mm-hmm.
English?
How's anybody else feeling about what we're hearing? Because I'm having a reaction in my gut right here. What's anybody else thinking about what Eloy's telling us?
Well, I think that it goes like even further than that, because most bilingual speakers who are fluent in English and another language are like speak English really well. You know what I mean? Like grammatically, because when you learn two languages, you're learning the grammar and everything from both languages. And to me, it feels like people who speak English, just English, speak it worse. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
grammatically don't speak it as well. And so it goes even deeper, because it's like, well, I speak two languages better than you speak one language. And you're sitting here telling me that I'm not qualified because I learned one of two languages before the other or something. Like it really, I don't know. My mom is a huge stickler for the words that you choose and speaking grammatically correct. And so like everybody in my family is just kind of hyper aware of it. And so I don't know. I've tried to learn multiple languages before. I'm currently trying to learn Spanish, like to the best of my ability, practicing every day. It is so hard. Like anybody who speaks two languages, I think I don't know. I look up to them. I think it's so cool.
Jazzy, I think the point that you've made about people who English is their first language, not speaking it as well as people who learn multiple languages, almost goes back to privilege, right? It's my first language. I don't have to speak it well. But if you're coming in here with two languages, I expect, the utmost excellence out of you. And I think that's just absolutely unrealistic. But before we derail, Brian, what was your moment of a microaggression?
Yes. So mine happened at my first job, and it didn't technically happen to me, but I was in earshot, and it happened to a student. So I had to advocate for somebody who was honestly powerless, like in that moment. So one of my students who was in the after-school program, she was talking to her assistant principal, grade level assistant principal, about something that was going on. So principal said, like, hey, like, I'll call your mom. And then the girl was like, no, like, you can call my dad. Black girl, 7th or 8th grade. She's like, oh, like, I'm surprised that he's in the home. Literally said this to the girl straight to her face. Like, I had to sit there for a second and process, because I'm like, this has got to be, like, a joke. But it wasn't. And she had history, like, from anecdotal experience and hearing that she had said reckless stuff to people before. So I sat on it for a day because I didn't want to respond out of anger, because that comes with its own set of stereotypes, and just didn't want to open that can of worms. So I sat on it for a day, and I brought it to her attention, like, hey, like, I heard you talking the other day to so-and-so, and you stated that you didn't assume that her dad would be in the home. So I explained to her how that's a stereotype and how it was disrespectful. She didn't take it well. But that's how she typically is about much of anything. So I didn't expect much from her, but I know it needed to be said. And then I ended up talking to the student and letting her know, like, that wasn't okay. And told, like, her boss too, like, you can't just be saying reckless stuff like this to students. If that's how you address students about, like, seemingly menial stuff, then how is that informing your work every day? How is that informing how you address students when your stress level is heightened or not? Like, so it's impossible for that not to spill into your work. Most of our behavior, I think, like 90 to 95% is informed by our unconscious beliefs. So that is spilling into your work. So I just wanted to tell her, because it was absolutely ridiculous.
That was a blatant microaggression. Yeah. I hope that's not an oxymoron, but that's what it was. And the fact that she wasn't even opening to understanding how that could be is what makes it madness in the workplace. Because if I'm trying to explain to you how your intent, and I can't even begin to imagine what her intent was in that comment, has impacted me, if you're not even willing to explore that, that's really the madness in the workplace. We're, again, relating this back to March Madness and some of the things that happen on the floor, and how, a flop is the over exaggeration of something that's not that big of a deal. But in terms of a microaggression, when we try and explain that to you, it's again seen by the others, who are the majority, as not that big of a deal. And that's not the case. But unless you're willing to be open to understanding, for lack of a better word, and again, to relate this back to basketball, the rules of engagement, unless you're willing to understand the rules of engagement, which says you have to manage the intent of your words with the impact that it's going to have on someone, we're going to continue to have these things. And we're going to continue to have a situation where I'm telling you it's a foul and you're telling me that it's not. That's the problem that we're addressing this morning. Jazzy, what's your microaggression?
So mine happened not in the workplace. It happened. I was looking at apartments to move into a couple of years ago, and I found this one, and it was so nice. It looked really nice, and the person leading the tour around the place just kept remarking about the kitchen to me and saying like, oh, the women really like how this one has a dishwasher and all of this stuff. And I was like, I burn absolutely everything that I cook. Like, I'm so bad at cooking. I don't know why you're telling me this. I don't like, I clean the other house, I do other chores, but like, I don't cook, and I don't do the dishes, and I hadn't touched the dishwasher because that was just my partner's job. Like, that's what he really liked to do. He just took care of the kitchen. And so the whole time we're walking around, and he's just like, yeah, the dishwasher is really nice. There's like the stove, like all this stuff about the kitchen. And for me, it was just frustrating because it's like, I literally am the breadwinner of my family. Like, I make 5 to 6 figures a year on my own business, and I don't do that. I just don't do that. And so, yeah, it was really interesting. And then my partner, who's a white male and has a lot of privilege, and his family doesn't necessarily like discuss issues that are like under the surface, really. And so he was trying, well, maybe he was saying it like this, maybe he didn't mean it about that. And I was like, no, he for sure meant because I'm a woman that I should be cooking and cleaning. Like, that's what he was alluding to. And that's kind of what my partner always does, is very almost like a devil's advocate all the time. And so it wasn't that he was saying like, oh, I don't believe you, but he was like, well, look at it from his perspective. And I was like, I'm tired of looking at it from his perspective. Like, he shouldn't, if he's trying to sell an apartment, he shouldn't be saying that stuff to people. Like, I don't know. I thought it was a beautiful, gorgeous apartment, and I probably would have rented it, but I was like, if he's going to manage my building, like, I don't want to be part of it.
See, and that goes back to intent and impact, regardless of whoever else he says that to. If you've already told him, I don't cook, that's his indicator to stop saying that to you. And again, his intent was trying to get you interested. But if the impact is having you tell him, I don't cook, then he needs to stop. And too often, people of privilege, they're always telling people that they other, well, look at it from a different perspective. Well, I've got news for you. I'm always looking at it from the different perspective. Why don't you look at it from the different perspective, which happens to be my perspective? We all need to be much more aware of our personal attitudes, beliefs, and conversations that help to continue to promote microaggressions, especially when it's been brought to your attention and you refuse to change because you refuse to look at it from another perspective. Because the other always has to be the bigger person to say, well, I'll overlook it. Well, you didn't mean it like this. I was leading a discussion once, and we like to talk about, well, assume best intent. And one of the women, a woman of color, a Black woman, said, I'm sorry, but I can't always assume best intent. That's why we're having these discussions. And when you think about it, it's true. We can't always assume best intent, especially if people who are not willing to look at their own attitudes, beliefs, and conversations. People that are not willing to admit the fact that they've got a filter on other people that says, I'm going to apply my assumptions, interpretation, limiting beliefs on you because that's what I'm assuming. That's what I know. And sexism is just as important in the workplace as othering based on race. And so I really want us to leave the conversation with that, because some of the viewers that we have who might be people of color might say, well, her example wasn't really relevant. Yes, it is, because if you feel othered, if you feel outside of the norm, it's relevant. There was a college professor, the dean actually of one of my first degrees. And I had been through a test, And I tried to get the professor to understand that this is why I felt the grade wasn't accurate. And so she said, well, you're more than welcome to go see the dean. The dean was a white male. I stated my case, and he said, well, I'm not going to change your grade, but you're still a very attractive woman. Now, I don't know if that was supposed to be a consolation prize because this older white guy thought that I was attractive and I should be happy with that. But it's comments like that that clearly prove we still need to have these discussions. Now, that being said, it was a while ago, but these are the types of things that people need to be aware of when they're making their comments. Again, I don't know what his intent was any more than we know the intent of the woman that Brian, shared with us. But the impact was, what am I supposed to do with that? And that's why we still have these conversations, because people are people. If we have a brain, we have bias. Hopefully, most people that we're dealing with have a brain, which explains the bias. But that's why these conversations are so important. I mean, Shar, you opened this up very well when you said, it's something that I've heard all my life, and so I've just learned to live with it. Well, no, we shouldn't have to learn to live with it. Just because we've heard it all our lives means that it's been misapplied all our lives. So, as usual, I want to thank my crew for always showing up well and having a great conversation. I want you to contribute to the dialogue because these conversations are about you. I want to explore topics around diversity, inclusion, and belonging in any format to help all of us think about our attitudes, beliefs, and conversations that help us better manage our intent with our impact when we're talking to others. To learn about my services and resources, please visit my website, www.drnita.com. Remember, you got to spell out the word doctor. And while you're there, click the media link. It's in the middle. Keeping It Real podcast to hear this podcast again or any of my other podcasts. And please subscribe, like, and review because it means a lot to me. I want to bring content that you find valuable. Until the next time, this is Dr. Nita reminding you to stay blessed, keep it real, and keep it together during March Madness.